from my point of view, the president's not doing anything right. At the very least, he's not achieving much of his plan. There's a lot about this that that defies reason. And yet, Trump now is very competitive among Hispanics.
When we put Trump up against Bernie Sanders, I think that's most interesting for now, because that's populism on the right versus populism on the left. Overall, Democratic Party platform just doesn't have anything better other than look at what wild thing Trump did or said today.
It's Friday, and that means it's another edition of Real Polling in Real Time with Zogby. And that's us. I'm John Zogby, and I'm with my son, managing partner, Jeremy Zogby. How you doing this week?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well. And the president's doing well, too. And it's funny because it's time, I think, for a reality check, for reading the pulse of what's going on. Because from my point of view, and I'm coming somewhat from the left, but from my point of view, the president's not doing anything right. At the very least, he's not achieving much of his plan. He's doing deportations. Some of them are getting blocked by courts, reinforced. Not all of them, but some of them. His tariff policy is a disaster. There's a lot of confusion, and a court just struck down his authority to do global tariffs, although within a few hours another court backed him up on that. There's an awful lot of confusion. He's using his powers frequently to pardon prisoners, some of which leave your head scratching. A Chicago murderer, gang member running a drug trade from prison, full pardon. The Chrisleys, reality, whatever it is that they do. I've seen a minute of it, and that was a minute too much. But they released as well. In short, on one hand, it doesn't appear like he's achieving anything good. On the other hand, we have a brand new poll out, which we're going to be talking about in detail, but a brand new poll that shows that he's not really slipping at all, and that when he's matched against some of the leading Democrats and possible contenders in 2028, President, either matches them or is slightly ahead. So what do you think is going on here?
Yeah, I think what it is the electorate they're going to all different kinds of channels and sources for their media and information. And that's no surprise. But when we break it down demographically into three distinct media cohorts, and we have local media, the voters who primarily trust local media versus legacy media, which are national newspapers and national networks and their online platforms, versus new media, which is social media and podcasts. And so when you break it down that way, it makes a lot more sense. Legacy media, Trump can't do anything right. He can't say anything right. He's failing every day. Local media, about split, but a little bit more in favor of Trump. And then new media, podcasts and X and other social media sites, Trump is way ahead. And so it depends how you're discerning your events, the narratives of the daily and weekly events. But when we put it all together, and I think the real cohorts that I'm going to look at are always going to be the independent voters. Where do they stand? Men and women, because those are two different realities. And then Hispanic voters are looking very much like a bellwether group. So through those lens, let's look at those head-to-head matchups of Trump versus key Democrats.
Okay. So, I mean, some of the groups that you mentioned, one poll, a YouGov poll, showed that Trump was losing his edge significantly among young men. We don't find that at all. We don't find him losing that slight edge that he had among Hispanic voters either. In fact, what we found in his approval rating in this poll pretty much matches what the Hispanic vote was back in November. So we're kind of right back to where we were. I, for one, think it says an awful lot about the Democrats, and then, of course, about where independents are, and Democrats not being able to make much headway among independents. But do you want to share some numbers?
Yeah, I want to share some numbers, and then I want to touch on that too, because I think the other driving factor is the state of the Democratic Party and their playing field. So when we put Trump up against Bernie Sanders, I think that's most interesting for now, because that's populism on the right versus populism on the left. And we do have a tight race here of 45.6% of the public, the voters opting for President Trump if the election were held today, versus 45.1. And so, I mean, it's a virtual tie, but we'll say that there's a slight edge of 5 survey participants. But when we look to independents, this is revealing. This is revealing about where independents could go. 41% of them go with Bernie, 38% of them go with Trump. And that's significant because we see, on the one hand, a split among the independent vote, but a preference still for a populist figure, just one different than Trump. Let's hold that thought, because when we go to the next two head-to-heads, we'll compare those independents. But let's look at, before we do that, let's look at men and women. Mm-hmm. Men clearly 51% for Trump, 40% for Sanders. It's key that Trump gets a majority. With women, Sanders gets just barely 50%, and Trump gets 40%. So we see the gender gap is strong. And then the last of the cohorts we'll look at in this head-to-head is Hispanics. 46% of Hispanics for Trump, 44 for Sanders, and I think on the face that kind of proves the Hispanic vote as a key and swing vote.
Yeah, it really is. And just by way of a comment about Hispanics, one of the things that I find very puzzling is the president issuing deportation orders backed by the United States Supreme Court against Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, all living here legally and all mainly gained in gainful employment. What's ironic about that is that these are from communist countries, or socialist countries anyway. They are fundamentally conservative, and when they do become naturalized U.S. citizens, they have been voting overwhelmingly Republican. And so I'm very puzzled at the deportation order among them, especially since they are living here legally, and those who support their staying are doing so for business and community purposes, saying that they they are mainstays in the agricultural field and in other construction and so on. And so there's a lot about this that that defies reason. And yet Trump now is very competitive among Hispanics.
Yeah. I mean, I'm tempted to want to respond to that, but I don't want to get off track here. I mean, clearly, Democrats broke the stronghold they had on Hispanics, and Republicans have made strong inroads on the issue of immigration, with a focus on the border and security, and also combining crime into that. but I mean, clearly we see that division among the Hispanic vote. But here, speaking of the Hispanic vote, here's what happened. Here's another name that has caught a lot of attention over the last couple of months is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And so we put Trump up against AOC in a head-to-head. If the election were held today, which candidates would the voters vote for? And overall, 47% went with Trump versus 43 with Cortez. I'd say a comfortable lead, 10% undecided. I want to go straight to the independent vote, and then I want to go to the Hispanic vote. 42% of independents preferring Trump versus 35, a clear edge for Donald Trump. I think independents there don't see AOC as the equivalent or the equal to Sanders. Sanders is the brand of populism on the left and for the Democrats. AOC, a rising star, but probably, this is my interpretation of the independent voters, probably couldn't hold their own against the president. Let me go to Hispanics on this race. And this is telling decisively Hispanic voters go for Trump 49% versus AOC 43.
Yeah, that's quite a, that's a 4-point margin. Of course, a lot of it has to do with
6-point margin.
49,
yes, 43.
Okay, I was looking at the wrong chart here. But clearly, what's involved here also is that AOC is not as well known as Bernie Sanders, who's been out running nationally now for, the better part of a decade. Nonetheless, you see where a Democrat who's new has some catching up to do, even among Hispanics who used to be in the bag for Democrats.
Yeah. So we'll do this last one, and then we'll have our closing remarks here. But of course, we always revisit November 24, Trump versus Harris. And so today, if the election were held again, here we are at the end of May, where do voters stand? And we have, I'm going to get precise with decimals here, 47.7 for Trump, 45.1, a 2.5-point lead that Trump has. And then for independents, it's a 5-point lead in favor of Trump. For Hispanics, it is a 5-point lead in favor of Trump. So to go back to your point about the Democratic Party platform, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're just not coming forth. And of course, it's still early in this cycle. We've only gotten past the first 100 days of the presidency, and the presidency is still strong among voters on the issue of immigration, which is the number 2 issue. The economy is slipping with the president, but overall, Democratic Party platform just doesn't have anything better other than look at what wild thing Trump did or said today, which is mirrored by the media.
And that's going to be troublesome because in 2020, it was enough to not be Donald Trump after one term. And it also helped that the Joe Biden who ran in 2020 was a kind of a compelling, steady kind of persona. But his presidency certainly in the closing year and a half or so really helped to do the party in. The fact that he lied to the American people, but also the Democrats really are just bankrupt with new ideas and are hopelessly split as well. But it is not going to be enough to simply not be Donald Trump. There's going to have to be a proactive agenda that voters across the spectrum can identify with. And that doesn't mean a choice between white, blue collar, and academics and progressives and so on. It's going to have to mean a healing and a binding agenda. I don't see that coming just yet.
Yeah. But we do have more data, which we're going to release over the next several days. I think what we're going to do next week is we'll send out the overall approval, as well as on 5 or 6 areas of the Trump presidency, and we'll have that early next week. Otherwise, we're just going to get this out over the weekend. This latest edition.
Sounds good. Have a good week.
Yeah, you have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks.